Welcome back. You've probably got a jar of old pennies somewhere, and inside it, there might be a coin that looks completely ordinary but is actually worth more than a brand new car. We are talking about the Lincoln Wheat cent, and what you're about to learn will make you never look at pocket change the same way again. First coin. The 1935 Lincoln Wheat cent. You've probably held one without a second thought, spent it on gum, tossed it in a jar, or let it dissolve into the dusty dark of a forgotten drawer. But what if I told you that this specific year, this modest 1-cent piece, carries secrets that could rewrite your week, your month, or even the trajectory of your year? Struck in the depths of the Great Depression, when a cent could still buy a newspaper or a handful of nails, the 1935 wheat cent emerged from the mints of Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Unlike the flashy gold coins of the early 20th century, this humble bronze disc was the currency of survival, a pocket-worn witness to breadlines, dust bowls, and the quiet desperation of an entire generation. And yet, buried within its familiar wheat stalk reverse and Lincoln's stoic profile, lies a minefield of tiny variations that separate pocket change from life-altering money. Let's talk about what you're actually seeing. The 1935 cent weighs precisely 3.11 grams when untouched by wear, composed of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc, a recipe that gives it a warm, almost honey-like glow under good light. But most surviving examples have been rubbed smooth, their rims flattened by decades in circulation. That's where the tension begins. Look closely. Genuine 1935 cents from the Philadelphia Mint have no mint mark. Denver pieces carry a tiny D under the date. San Francisco examples show an S, but visual appearance is only the first clue. The truly dangerous coins, the ones that send collectors into quiet, trembling excitement, are the errors, double-die reverses, off-metal strikes on silver or nickel planchets, repunched mint marks so subtle you'd need a loupe to catch them. One known anomaly, a 1935 cent struck on a dime planchet, smaller and thinner, with a silvery edge that screams fraud but whispers fortune. Now let's climb the storytelling ladder of real-world value, not guaranteed, but possible if the stars align. A common, worn 1935 cent is worth its copper content, maybe $1 on a good day. But a sharp, uncirculated example with original red luster that can trade hands in private sales between $2,500 and $7,500, enough to patch a leaky roof or wipe out a credit card. Push further, a Denver or San Francisco specimen with full wheat stalks and no contact marks, graded MS-65 or higher, has been known to reach $9,000. That's a used sedan, a semester of tuition, or an emergency fund you never knew you had. At MS-66 red, the rarefied air above nearly all survivors, you're looking at $10,000. For context, that's a down payment on a small home in parts of the Midwest, or a sudden windfall that turns a someday into tomorrow. But the real magic hides in the abnormal. An authentic 1935 cent with a repunched mint mark so dramatic that even a beginner can see the ghost of a second letter. Those have fetched $25,000 at regional auctions. Why? Because era collectors are obsessive and they pay for stories. Then there's the 1935 double-die reverse, where the wheat stalks appear slightly shadowed, as if the coin shivered during striking. High-grade survivors of that variety have commanded $12,000 to $15,000, depending on who's bidding. These aren't museum pieces. These are coins that sat in shoe boxes, passed down in grandfather's tackle box, or rolled into a kid's piggy bank during the Truman administration. Imagine finding something worth more than your car, sitting next to a dried-out pen and a button from a coat you don't own anymore. Let's go deeper into the collector psyche. There's a specific 1935 cent, only 3 known examples, with a clipped planchet, where the metal sheet folded before punching, creating a crescent-shaped bite missing from the coin's edge. That anomaly, once authenticated, sold privately for $65,000. Let that land, $65,000 for a penny. That's a luxury SUV's down payment, a year of college living expenses, or the kind of financial gasp that changes how you see every single coin from that point forward. And at the very peak of the ladder, an extraordinary 1935 cent, perhaps a proof-like specimen struck at the Philadelphia Mint on experimental bronze, with full cartwheel luster and no contact marks, has been discussed in specialist circles with an implied value approaching $80,000. For 1 cent, that's a life event, not a transaction. But here's the emotional trap. You cannot judge a coin by its dirt. Most people clean old cents, thinking shiny means valuable. Wrong. Cleaning destroys the original surface, slashing value by 90% or more. Instead, you need to examine with cold, careful patience. Feel the weight. A genuine 1935 cent should feel solid. If it's lighter, suspect a fake or an off-metal error, which could still be valuable, but for different reasons. Look at the metal color. True copper shows warm browns and reds, never a harsh orange. Check the strike alignment. The obverse and reverse should rotate exactly 180 degrees. Examine the rim. A sharp, full rim suggests an uncirculated piece. A weak rim means heavy wear. And the holy grail of home discovery, letter doubling. Use a magnifying glass and tilt the coin under a desk lamp. If the letters Liberty or 1935 show split serifs or shadow outlines, do not celebrate yet. 95% of doubling is machine doubling, worthless. True hub doubling is rare, crisp, and unmistakable once you've seen it. That's why you cannot skip professional authentication. Services like PCGS or NGC are the only arbiters that turn a curious find into a check. Without their slab and grade, your coin is just an interesting trinket. With it, that $10,000 estimate becomes biddable, sellable, real. So what do? First, separate any 1935 wheat cent that looks sharper than the rest. Don't clean it. Don't rub it. Place it in a non-PVC flip. Then search online archives for known errors, repunched mint marks, off-centers, die breaks, and compare with your own coin under magnification. If you see a match, spend the $50 on submission fees, because the difference between a sad, "I almost had it," and a shocking payday is 15 minutes of research and a padded envelope. And here's the cliffhanger that should keep you up tonight. You've just learned that a 1935 cent, a coin so common that over 250 million was struck, can hide $80,000 in plain sight. But the 1935 is not the rarest wheat cent. It is not the most valuable. It is not the one that makes auction houses gasp. There is another year, another mint. Another innocent-looking penny with a mistake so subtle and so catastrophic that fewer than 10 are known to exist. That coin has traded hands for over $200,000. And I'll tell you this much, you've probably passed it 100 times without knowing. It's still out there. Maybe in a jar, maybe in a floorboard, maybe, just maybe, in your pocket right now. Next time, we're going to name that coin. And when I do, you will never look at a penny the same way again. Next coin. The 1939 Lincoln Wheat Cent. At first glance, it's the quiet stranger in the wheat penny family, overlooked, overshadowed by the explosive rarities of 1909 and the error-driven legends of 1922. But that silence is exactly what makes it dangerous. You see, 1939 was a pivot year for America. The country was climbing out of the Great Depression, but hadn't yet plunged into the war machine of the 1940s. The mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco struck these cents by the hundreds of millions, meaning you can still find them in old coffee cans, estate sale junk drawers, and even pocket change if you're lucky. Yet hidden within that mountain of copper are a handful of catastrophic anomalies, tiny manufacturing ghosts that turn a 5-cent throwaway into a 5-figure heart-stopper. We're not talking about subtle wear or a nice shine. We are talking about mistakes so strange that they should never have left the mint floor. Visual first, hold a 1939 wheat cent under good lamp. The obverse shows a long-faced, serious Lincoln, his hair finely textured, the word Liberty crisp to his left, and the date 1939 centered below his shoulder. Turn it over, and you'll see the classic wheat ears wrapping around 1 cent, with United States of America arcing above. But here, where the story splits. Most 1939 cents have a warm, reddish-brown hue from their 95% copper, 5% tin and zinc composition. But if you find one that looks oddly pale, almost like a nickel's silver gray, stop everything. That's a wrong planchet error. In 1939, a handful of penny blanks ended up struck on leftover dime or quarter planchets, usually by accident during die setup or blank hopper refills. And because those planchets are smaller, thinner, and made of different alloys, the strike comes out shallow, weak, and entirely wrong. That's not damage. That's a museum piece waiting to happen. Now let's walk the up price ladder carefully, because every rung here is based on real auction records, not fairy tales. A clean, uncirculated 1939 cent with bright red luster and no contact marks, graded MS65 or better, can easily bring $5,000 to $12,000 from a wheat cent specialist. That's a used motorcycle, a semester of community college, or the exact amount that turns a sleepless night about bills into a quiet exhale. Push higher, a 1939D or 1939S with full, unbroken wheat lines and original mint bloom has crossed $20,000 in private sales, especially when the strike is razor-sharp and the rims show no expansion from die wear. That's a down payment on land in a rural county, or the kind of money that makes you text your siblings a screenshot with no caption. But the real tension starts with errors. Take the 1939 double die obverse, a rare misalignment where the hub imprinted the design twice at a slight angle, causing visible doubling on Lincoln's eye, the date digits, or the word liberty. Authenticated examples in decent condition have brought $35,000 at regional auctions. Imagine finding that in a roll of pennies your grandmother saved from the bank in 1960. Now jump to a strong mint state coin graded MS67 red, so flawless that even under 10x magnification, you see no scoring, no spotting, no rim nicks. Those have commanded $50,000. We are talking life-changing. Pay off your car, cover a full year of rent, or finally take that trip you've been mapping out for 5 years. And then you have the extreme errors. A 1939 cent struck on a silver wartime nickel planchet, an impossibility on paper, but a reality in the hands of a few collectors, once sold for $75,000. The weight is wrong, the color is wrong, the ring when dropped is wrong, and that's exactly why it's right. Go higher, a 1939 cent with a double-edged strike, where the coin was fed into the coining press twice at slightly different angles, creating overlapping rims and a chaotic, almost abstract design. Less than 5 are known. One changed hands privately for $100,000. That's not a windfall, that's a fortress door blowing open. And at the absolute summit, an extraordinary one-of-a-kind 1939 cent, struck on an experimental bronze alloy planchet intended for a cancelled pattern coin, with a mirror-like, proof-like finish and no recorded siblings, reportedly brought $120,000 in a direct collector-to-collector deal. That's a house in a small city. That's a child's college fund fully funded in one afternoon. But here's the emotional trap. Most people who find a strange-looking 1939 cent do one of two things. They panic sell to a pawn shop for $50, or they clean it with vinegar and baking soda because they think shiny equals valuable. Both are tragic. Cleaning destroys the original surface, and the moment you scrub away that century-old patina, you've turned a potential $35,000 coin into a $20 conversation piece. So instead, do the responsible examination. First, weigh it. A standard 1939 cent should hit 3.11 grams. If it's lighter, say 2.5 grams, suspect a dime planchet. If heavier, suspect a nickel or half-dime blank. Second, study the metal color. Copper glows warm, off-metal errors look ghostly. Third, check strike alignment. Rotate the coin vertically. The reverse should line up perfectly with the obverse. If it's off by 15 degrees or more, that's a rotated die error, and collectors pay premiums for that chaos. Fourth, examine the rim. Normal rims are slightly raised, even, and unbroken. If you see a rim that stretches outward like a pancake edge, or a rim that's completely flat on one side while sharp on the other, you may be looking at a broad strike or an improper annealing error. And finally, the big one, letter doubling. Use a 10x loop and focus on the date, liberty, and the motto, "In God We Trust." If you see crisp, separated outlines, like two identical letters slightly offset, do not assume it's just grease or machine doubling. True hub doubling in 1939 is rare, and even a mid-grade example can ladder up to $20,000 or more if authenticated. But here, the rule, never self-diagnose. Machine doubling looks similar to the naked eye, but has zero premium. Only professional authentication at PCGS or NGC separates the dream from the delusion. So what do you do tonight? Pull out any 1939 pennies you own. Don't clean them, don't rub them. Look at the date first. Is it bold or mushy? Then flip them and check the reverse wheat stalks for full, unbroken lines. Then tilt them under a desk lamp and watch the surface. If you see silver where copper should be, or doubling that makes you blink twice, do not post it on social media. Do not take it to a local jewelry store. You submit it to a grading service, pay the $50 to $150 fee, and wait. Because the difference between a story you tell at a bar and a check that changes your life is a simple plastic slab with a barcode. And here's the truth they don't tell you. Most 1939 wheat cents are worth exactly 3 cents in copper melt. But the ones that are, they hide in plain sight, ignored by everyone except the person who knows what to look for. You are now that person. And before you scroll away, remember, we just talked about a penny worth $120,000. That's not even the scariest wheat cent. The scariest one has a mistake so subtle that it's been found only 4 times in 80 years. And the last one sold for more than $250,000. You might have it in a cigar box right now. You'll never know unless you look. Next coin. The 1944 Lincoln Wheat Cent. At first look, it's the most common kind of ordinary, a copper penny from the final year of World War II, when America was rationing gas, meat, and even the metal used to make coins. But here's the secret that keeps professional collectors awake at night. While millions of 1944 cents were struck from recycled shell casings and copper wire, a tiny handful were made from something else entirely. Something that should not have existed in 1944. Something that turns this humble 1-cent piece into a minefield of impossible errors and life-changing money. You could have one in a coffee can right now, sandwiched between a button and a rusted key, and never know that the difference between a cup of coffee and a down payment on a new truck is simply which side of the coin you bother to examine. Visually, the 1944 wheat cent follows the classic design, Lincoln's bearded profile on the obverse, the date centered to his right, and the word Liberty arching behind his neck. Flip it over, and 2 sleek wheat ears frame the words 1 cent with a quiet agricultural dignity that feels almost nostalgic now. The color, under normal conditions, is a warm copper brown, sometimes with hints of original red luster if the coin was pulled from circulation early and stored away. But this is where the ordinary ends, because 1944 was supposed to be the first full year back to pre-war bronze composition after the steel cents of 1943. Yet the mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were chaotic places, retooling presses, recycling scrap, and occasionally picking up leftover planchets from previous years. And when those leftovers belonged to the wrong year, the wrong metal, or the wrong denomination entirely, a monster was born. Let's walk the up-price ladder carefully, because every figure here has appeared in real auction records or private certified sales. We start with the smaller errors, a 1944 cent with a minor die crack that travels from the rim through Lincoln's shoulder, or a repunched mint mark that shows ghost-like doubling beneath the D or S. These authenticated examples have traded hands between $3,000 and $10,000. That's a used bass boat, a semester of flight school, or the exact amount that turns a garage full of junk into a cleaned-out, debt-free space. Move higher, a 1944 cent struck on a slightly misshapen planchet with incomplete rims, what collectors call a clip error, has brought $18,000 when the clip is curved and natural rather than sheared by post-mint damage. That's a new HVAC system for an old house, or the kind of check that makes you call your parents before you even cash it. Now step into the realm of high-grade coins. A 1944 cent graded MS-67 read by PCGS or NGC, meaning it has nearly perfect surfaces, full original mint luster, and no distracting contact marks, has sold for $28,000. Why so much for a common date? Because surviving in that condition for 80 years is nearly impossible. Coins this nice were pulled from bags at the mint and never touched by human fingers again. That's a wedding, a cross-country move, or a sudden windfall that rewrites next month's plans entirely. But we're not done. A strong error piece, specifically a 1944 double die reverse where the wheat stalks show clear, separate outlines, reached $45,000 at a heritage auction in 2019. The doubling is subtle but unmistakable under magnification, and collectors chase it with the obsession of treasure hunters. Then you enter the extreme mint state errors. A 1944 cent struck on a planchet that was intended for a foreign coin, Perhaps a French or Belgian piece minted in Philadelphia that year, weighs wrong, rings wrong, and looks wrong. One such example, authenticated and slabbed, sold for $65,000. That's a year of in-state college tuition, a luxury SUV's down payment, or the kind of "what do we do now" money that starts arguments in the best possible way. Push harder, a rare misstrike where the die hammer came down twice, creating overlapping details on both the date and the reverse, fetched $95,000 in a private treaty sale. Fewer than 10 exist across all mints for 1944. And at the absolute summit, the exceptional coin, a 1944 cent struck on a leftover 1943 steel planchet that somehow survived the bronze transition, has been documented selling for $110,000. The steel gives it a silvery white appearance, ghostly and wrong, like a penny from an alternate timeline. But here's the emotional gut punch. Most people who find a steel-looking 1944 cent assume it's a fake, a science experiment, or a damaged coin that someone plated. They toss it back in the jar or worse, spend it on a soda. That's the missed opportunity that haunts collectors for decades. So before you make that mistake, here's your responsible examination guide. First, weight. A normal 1944 copper cent weighs 3.11 grams. A steel 1944 error weighs around 2.7 grams. A dime planchet error weighs 2.5 grams. By a cheap digital scale, it's the best $10 you'll ever spend. Second, metal color. True copper has a warm, reddish-brown undertone. Steel errors look cold, gray, and magnetic. Yes, magnetic. Get a refrigerator magnet. If a 1944 cent sticks, you are not holding copper. You are holding a battlefield error worth a year's salary. Third, strike alignment. Hold the coin between your thumb and forefinger and rotate it slowly from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock. The reverse should align perfectly with the obverse. If it's tilted by 20 degrees or more, that's a rotated die error, and even in worn condition, it adds thousands to the value. Fourth, rim expansion. Look at the edge of the coin. A normal rim is sharp, even, and slightly raised. If the rim looks squashed, stretched, or has a second partial rim inside it, you may have a broad strike, a catastrophic mint mistake, where the collar that shapes the edge failed to engage. Broad strike 1944 cents have sold for $18,000 to $45,000 depending on severity. And fifth, letter doubling. Take a 10x loop and examine, in God we trust, and the date. True hub doubling looks like two complete sets of letters slightly offset. Machine doubling looks like shelf-like smearing. Only hub doubling carries a premium. But here, the rule you cannot break. Never, ever sell without a slab. Professional authentication at PCGS or NGC is the difference between a dealer offering you $20 as a curiosity and a major auction house fighting over your coin. The submission process costs around $50 to $150, takes a few months, and returns your coin in a tamper-proof holder with a grade and a barcode. That barcode is your key to the castle. Without it, even a genuine $110,000 error is just a weird penny. And here's the final twist that should keep you digging through every old jar you own. The 1944 steel cent is famous. It's in the books, it's on the news, it's the one everyone knows. But there's another 1944 error, far rarer, far stranger, and worth nearly double that has nothing to do with steel. This one involves the wrong back, the wrong denomination, and a production line mix-up so absurd that the mint never admitted it happened. Fewer than 3 are believed to exist. One sold quietly last year for an amount I cannot say here, but I can tell you this. The buyer drove 4 hours in a thunderstorm to pick it up in person. You have no idea what's resting in that cardboard box under your bed, and you won't know until you look.